My name is Jake. I'm just an ordinary guy from Chicago. I work in IT, love sports, and enjoy watching TV shows in the evenings. To be honest, I've always thought my life was pretty predictable. Everything went according to plan. Until, my girlfriend, Emma, was everything to me. She worked as an interior designer, and I admired her creativity. Her laugh was what made even the worst day better. We had been together for 4 years and I was planning to propose to her. We have always been a team. No secrets, no drama, or so I thought. Recently, something has changed. It's hard to describe it in words, but it's like feeling like there's someone else in the room, even if it's just the two of us. Emma had become more distant, disappearing more often on business, and I thought it was because of her new big project. She said she was working with an important client, and I tried to support her. But every day the anxiety in my soul grew. I tried my best to convince myself that it was just stress, that I was being too paranoid. After all, why would she cheat on me? We are the perfect couple, right? Spoiler alert, I was very wrong. It all started with little things. First, Emma started staying late at work more often. We have a deadline, Jake. The client is very demanding, she said, quickly getting ready with her laptop under her arm. I nodded, smiled, and even ordered her dinner for delivery so she wouldn't go hungry. It seemed normal, but then other strangenesses appeared. She started wearing new dresses to work, even though she hadn't really cared about her appearance on weekdays before. The perfume I bought her a year ago suddenly started being worn every day. Her phone was always lying with the screen down, and once when I picked it up to find a picture of us together, she suddenly took it away with an expression as if I had violated her personal space. It's personal, okay? She said. Personal? She and I never had any secrets. Another thing, she started to seem out of place. Even when we were together, I felt like she was far away. Her eyes were blank, her answers were short, and I hated that I felt like an extra in my own relationship, but I tried to convince myself that it was normal. Maybe she's really going through a rough patch. Maybe it was just tiredness taking its toll, but it was something else that confused me the most. One evening I noticed her talking on the phone. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but she looked tense. When I entered the room, she quickly hung up. It was for work, she explained, not looking me in the eye. I didn't want to show her that I suspected anything. But it was then that I first realized that something was wrong. And maybe what I thought was a perfect relationship had long since ceased to be so. Emma has always been sociable. She easily found a common language with people, and this is one of the things that attracted me to her. But the new colleague she started mentioning gave me a feeling I couldn't shake. His name was Trevor. Trevor is helping with the project. He's a real professional, she said over dinner one night. I remember her smiling as she said it, and something in her expression made me wary. It wasn't just gratitude for the help of a colleague. Her smile looked too warm. A few weeks after the first mention of him, I met Trevor by chance. It happened at a corporate party to which Emma invited me. Tall, confident, with perfectly styled hair, he looked like a guy from a commercial. When Emma introduced us, he shook my hand and smiled, but his eyes were strange. It was as if he was trying to evaluate me, as if I were a competitor. I've heard a lot about you, Jake, Trevor said. His voice was even, but there was a hint of cockiness in it. Hopefully only good things, I replied, trying not to give away my suspicion. Throughout the evening, I couldn't help but notice how they talked. She was laughing at his jokes, nodding to his every word. It all looked, not quite like friendship. When he touched her hand, I felt something inside me turn over. On the way home, I decided to ask her cautiously, Trevor seems pretty close to you, doesn't he? What do you mean? She didn't even look at me, focusing on the road, nothing. It's just, you spend a lot of time with him, that's all. She turned away with a sigh. Jake, it's just a job. Don't be so paranoid. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to convince myself that it was all in my head. But subsequent events proved that my intuition was right. After that meeting with Trevor, I could no longer just ignore my suspicions. Something about their interaction made me feel like it was more than just work. But I still had no proof, and it didn't seem right to accuse Emma without it. So I decided to look for answers myself. One night, when Emma fell asleep, I picked up her phone. I knew it was wrong. But curiosity and fear got the better of me. My hands were shaking as I entered her password. Everything looked normal: messages from friends, family, a few work emails. Nothing suspicious, but then I noticed one thing. She was deleting chats. There were names of her friends and colleagues on the list, but not a single message from Trevor. Not a single word. It seemed strange, considering how often she mentioned him. I put the phone back on the table, disappointed and even more puzzled. A few days later, when I came home early, I saw her talking on the phone again. She was standing in the kitchen with her back to me, and her voice was so quiet I couldn't make out the words. But the tone was tense. When I entered the room, she turned around sharply. "Who was that?" I asked calmly. "It's just a colleague." A work-related question, she answered too quickly, putting the phone down on the table. Her eyes did not look into mine. She looked guilty, though she tried to hide it. That was the moment I realized something was definitely going on. I decided to follow her. I'm not proud of it, but when the person you love starts to be surrounded by secrets, it's hard to act logically. So one evening, when she said she was going to a work meeting, I got in the car and followed her. What I saw made my heart sink. She had indeed met with Trevor. But it wasn't a romantic dinner or anything like that. They were standing outside a coffee shop, and it looked like they were arguing. Her arms were crossed, and his gestures were harsh, as if he was annoyed. It was not what I expected to see. But it didn't bring any answers. What were they discussing? What was going on between them? My suspicions grew even stronger, but I still didn't know the whole truth. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything. The memory of their meeting at the coffee shop kept going over and over in my head. What were they discussing? Why did it look so tense? All of these questions remained unanswered, and I felt trapped. Emma didn't seem to suspect anything. She acted as if nothing had happened, but every move she made seemed rehearsed to me. Every word she said sounded too right, as if she knew I was watching closely. One evening I decided to talk to her again. "Emma, you work with Trevor a lot, right?" I asked, trying not to sound too direct. "Yes, he is one of the main people in our project." "Why do you ask?" Her answer was calm, but there was something wary in her eyes. "I just noticed that you spend a lot of time with him." I paused, considering whether I should say more. "Are you sure it's just work?" She looked at me sharply, her face drained. "Jake, what are you trying to say? That I'm cheating on you?" Her words took me by surprise. She uttered them with such indignation that I momentarily doubted my suspicions myself. But it didn't last long. "I don't know, Emma," I shrugged. "Maybe it's just my imagination. But your recent actions make me doubt it." She sighed in exasperation. "Jake, if you don't trust me, then what are we even doing here? Trevor is just a coworker. If you want, I don't even have to work on this project anymore." This answer struck me as strange. Why would she be willing to give up an important job so easily? Could she be trying to hush things up so that I would stop digging? The next day, something even stranger happened. I received an anonymous message on my phone. "You know nothing about her. But you deserve to know the truth." This message made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. What did it mean? Who could be writing to me? And most importantly, what truth did I deserve to know? I decided it was time to find out the truth, even if I didn't like the answer. The message broke me. I sat in my room looking at my phone screen and didn't know what to do next. Who could it be? Why are they writing to me? At first I thought it was a stupid joke, but something told me it wasn't. The next morning I couldn't stand it. I felt like I couldn't pretend like nothing was happening anymore. While Emma was drinking coffee, I asked her directly, "Emma, is there something you want to tell me?" She froze with her cup in her hands. Her eyes immediately changed, something between fright and irritation. "What do you mean?" She said in a cold tone, "I think you're hiding something from me, and I want to hear the truth." She looked at me as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. "Okay," she said after a long pause. "I'll tell you everything." Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. "Yes, I had an affair with Trevor," she said it quickly, as if she wanted to get the words out of her mouth. I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. But it was a mistake. It didn't last long, and I ended it a few weeks ago. Her words hit me like a knife. But what she said next was even worse. Trevor didn't just leave it at that. He started blackmailing me. He says he's going to tell my boss about the affair if I don't do what he wants. And he wants my place in the project. I just sat there and listened, unable to believe that this was happening to me. It all sounded like a bad movie, but it was real. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I finally asked. "I was afraid. I was afraid that I would lose you and that he would ruin my career." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know I betrayed you, and I'm ashamed. But I didn't know how to fix it." I sat there trying to figure out what to do next. I was hurt. But at the same time I knew that this was not the end of the story. Trevor had manipulated her, and I decided that he couldn't ruin my life. Emma's words echoed in my head like an echo in an empty room. An affair, blackmail, a career. It was hard for me to believe it all, but I knew one thing: Trevor had to answer for his actions. I decided to act. The next day, when Emma left for work, I gathered all my strength and called Trevor. He answered almost instantly. His voice sounded calm, even a little cocky. "Jake, hey," he said, as if he'd been expecting my call. "You have no idea who you're talking to," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll meet, and you'll tell me everything." Trevor just laughed. "You do realize I don't owe you anything, right?" His tone turned cold. "Your girlfriend made her choice. Deal with it." I arranged to meet him at a bar that evening. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready for anything. Trevor showed up on time. He looked just as confident as he did during our first meeting. We sat down at a table in the corner, and he got right down to business. "Jake, listen. I feel a little sorry for you. But let's be honest, you've already lost." "Lost?" I could barely contain my anger. "Yes. She came to me on her own. I didn't force her. She made a choice because you couldn't give her what she needed." He smiled as if he was enjoying every word. These words hurt me more than I could have imagined. But I noticed one thing: he wanted to make me angry. "It must have been his game, you know, Trevor," I said, looking him calmly in the eye. "I know you're blackmailing Emma. And I know it's not the first time you've done it." His smile disappeared. He tensed, but quickly composed himself. "Do you have any proof? If not, it's just your imagination." I took out my phone and showed him the message I had received the day before. "What's this? Looks like I'm not the only one who knows about your dirty games." Trevor tried to keep his cool, but I could see his mask falling away. He was no longer confident in his superiority. "Look," he said, leaning closer, "this is just business. If you leave here and forget about it, I'll leave you alone. But if you start digging deeper, you'll be sorry." His words did not scare me. On the contrary, they only fueled my determination. When I returned home, Emma was waiting for me. Her face was pale, her eyes red with tears. "I saw your message, Jake," she said in a trembling voice. "And I think I know who sent it." It turned out that there was another person who had been hurt by Trevor. Someone who decided to warn me so I would know who I was dealing with. When Emma said she knew who sent the message, I was shocked. It's Sarah, she said quietly. Sarah was a colleague of hers who had worked with Trevor on a previous project. Emma explained that Sarah had told her how Trevor manipulated others, exploiting their weaknesses to climb the career ladder. But Emma never thought she would become one of his victims. I decided to meet Sarah in person. She turned out to be a young woman who looked like she had been through a living hell. She told me that Trevor had used her for personal gain, and when he no longer needed her, he blamed her for the failure of the project. Her career was on the verge of collapse, and she decided to warn Emma when she saw that Trevor had taken up the same tactics with her. "This man is dangerous," Sarah said, clutching her coffee cup. "If you don't stop him, he will ruin your life just like he ruined mine." Her words were the last piece of the puzzle in this tangled story. I realized that not only was Trevor destroying our relationship, but he was also using Emma for his own career games. I came home knowing that I had to act fast. Emma and I decided to collect all the evidence of his manipulation and contact her management. She kept emails, messages, and even recordings of conversations with Trevor that proved his blackmail. The next day, Emma handed it all over to her boss. The reaction was immediate. Trevor was fired and an investigation was launched. That evening we sat together at home. For the first time in a long time, there were no secrets between us. "Jake," Emma said, her voice soft and slightly broken. "I know I broke your trust, but I want to make it right." I looked at her. Part of me still couldn't forgive. But another part of me could see how much she was sorry. "It's going to be hard," I said honestly. "But if you're willing to fight for it, I'm willing to fight for it." This story changed us both. I don't know if we can ever get back what we had before. But now I know one thing: true love is not about perfection. It's about struggle.